It's one thing to tell you, a good data story. It's another thing to build a culture where clear communication, empathy, and action become the norm. In this final part, we're going to explore practical steps to eliminate data malarkey from your organization and how to future-proof your supply chain decision-making in an AI-driven world. I love that starting with the answer, because it also puts the focus on what the prize is. So it's not now about how data is being presented. It's about, this is what we're all talking about. This is the prize. And then the notice of understanding your audience. Sometimes when you hear questions coming from people, you can start to use those questions that they're asking to try to understand not the type of person to be overly generalistic, but to understand maybe where they're coming from. And I think that's where Thomas Erickson's book, we mentioned it quite briefly, the notion of being surrounded by idiots. It can be quite helpful, although I'm not necessarily, and I know he also doesn't believe that people can be so easily characterized. The point is, if you are getting a lot of data-driven questions, then you are likely facing someone who Thomas would refer to as being blue, and is therefore going to want to understand in all degrees all of the data. And the best response to that is there is a detailed data report to which you can consume, and we can ask further questions later. And trying to park these things, can be helpful. What's your thoughts and reactions to that?
Absolutely. I mean, listen, I've written 3 books in the area of I characterize them as being in the area of data storytelling. There's one that is about storytelling, there's one about moving from data to insight, and there's one which I think is the first step in brilliant data storytelling, which is called asking smarter questions. I think that for too long, the act of asking smarter questions and genuinely listening to the answers has been, it's been put on the back burner, because we are validated in school, in university, in the world of work, in all those environments, by the answers that we give rather than the questions that we ask. And there's definitely work to be done. But I'm completely with you. Let me give you an analogy. When I was researching a doctorate in experimental psychology, I did a lot of teaching. I went back to school in my mid-30s and did a master's and a doctorate in psychology. And to make ends meet, and because if I'd have known at the time, because it would set me up for a career in training, I did a lot of teaching. And I taught 2nd and 3rd year undergraduates, and I also taught postdocs in statistics, because I fell in love with, I had to overcompensate with stuff. But the bane of any undergraduate teacher's life is the mature student. They're brilliant, the mature students, because they put the work in, they've got something else to prove to themselves and their family and their friends and so on and so on. If you've got a seminar and there are 7 journal articles, with a normal undergraduate group, if you skim the abstracts as a tutor and it's not your area, you'll be fine. If there's a mature student in the group, what they will do is they will say, oh, it's interesting you say that, but in this paper, and I read another paper, and then I read the book, because they've got the time, the inclination, the energy to do it. And they're much better read than you are. There was one mature student that I taught several courses over 2 years to. And the first time he caught me with my trousers down. And he wasn't trying to make me look stupid. He was trying to make himself look clever. But he did make me look stupid. But I learned from that experience. I spoke to another much more experienced teacher. And I said, that's a brilliant point. Let's call him Paul. That was his name. I won't say anymore. And that's a brilliant point, Paul. But you know what? That isn't, strictly speaking, required in this module. And we've got a lot to get through during the course of this seminar. So why not? Listen, I'd love to talk more about that. I've got an office hour on Friday, 11 till 12. Why don't you come and we'll focus in on that? And so you have satisfied, not his ego necessarily, but you've said to him, I acknowledge the fact that you've done this additional work and that you are really interested in the subject. I've acknowledged it to you, to praise you. I've acknowledged you in front of your peers, even if you're 2 or 3 times their age. And you've reinforced their view of mature students, that they do all the work, and how can that be possible? And so after I did that the first time, I waited in my office from 11 till 12 and he didn't turn up. And then I learned that it was a very strange creature who would actually take you up on that offer. But I sweated. I then read all of the articles that he'd read. Clearly, it was useful. But just the acknowledgement. So I'm not saying that to a blue numbers person, if you say that's a really interesting point, Paul. It's covered in these slides. Why don't we have a side meeting about this? Or let's not get derailed by that. That's absolutely right. But we can delve into that. Acknowledging that expertise, pointing out where the additional explanation of that might be, and offering the opportunity for an in-depth discussion. You might just be as lucky as I was with Paul that they never show up.
Yeah, my luck will be the opposite. I can tell you that for nothing. All right, Sam, look, we put you under a lot of pressure. You get that drink because we're about to move into a rapid fire session. So we're looking for a number of just really quick, short answers, just to try to cover some core areas that I think are still playing on my mind's eye. But you and I will be here all day if I was to try to get all the answers that I want. So let's go ahead and play the game, as it were. So what is the worst trend that you're seeing in dashboards today?
The fact they still exist? No, that's not fair. The fact that they are that people will take. I mean, this isn't a new trend. The fact that the people will take a snapshot, or indeed will display them live in a meeting and say, look at the insights here. That the people are too lazy or incapable of actually explaining what this donut chart and this bar chart and this word cloud. The word cloud. I know that. I mean, I'm sure you've. It's a long time since you've seen a dashboard with a word cloud. I'm afraid to say it's not. I have a friend who's written a book on social media analytics who describes the word cloud as the mullet of social media analytics. They were probably trendy in the 80s, maybe with David Hasselhoff, but they aren't anymore. They only show relative frequency. The continued lazy use of dashboards as a proxy for genuine insight. It must stop. It must stop.
Okay, then what is the one buzzword around data that's driving you crazy? You're not allowed to say Gen AI.
Damn, you've taken my answer away. Well, I mean, it has to be. It has to be something. Or you didn't say I can't say ChatGPT, or I didn't say I couldn't say LLM. I mean, it's definitely around. It's definitely around something to do with AI, and it's about the lazy use of AI, because I mean, I think that large language models, that many of the different tools that exist are really helpful for getting us through some of the drudgery. I'm doing some big data analysis at the moment, and the use of Gen AI to write code in R to analyze data in a more sophisticated way is fantastic. But it's definitely. I'm afraid you said I couldn't say Gen AI, so I'm just going to say AI, because there's a huge opportunity there that many are beginning to take. Like any distribution, to get statistical with you for a minute, like any distribution, it's going to be a normal distribution. What people assume is that everybody else is way ahead of them. But the more events I go to, run by law firms, run by media and marketing. I was presenting at a conference run by the Institute for Practitioners in Advertising last week. People are making really smart use of AI, and it is allowing them to differentiate themselves. But the lazy, we just threw this into ChatGPT and look at the amazing results. I mean, I asked. I think it was ChatGPT. I asked ChatGPT. I gave ChatGPT the other day the Apple Podcasts link to my podcast, Data Malarkey, and I said, write me a 500-word summary of the history of this podcast, highlighting the three highest profile, most important guests. And it told me, it did a pretty good job, but it highlighted 3 people who would be good to have as guests, but I'd never even approached. And I said, use only real guests. And said, well, I've got access to this, and the hallucinations to this lazy use of AI. Sorry.
No, love it, and no need to apologize because I threw it out there intentionally, because I've got to tell you, it is the one thing that is driving anyone working in this space crazy. So we'll do one last thing, and I really, just because I want to highlight the diversity of the industries that you work with, especially as a consultant, where you're out doing storytelling all over the place. So as a consultant, one of the privileges is that you're actually picking up lots of industry trends. So which industry's got it right? Who's doing the best storytelling?
Very, very, very interesting. Inevitably, I tend to, and I don't have a complete worldview, right? I definitely don't have a complete worldview. We're a small business. There's 3 core members of the business. There's 3 in a related part of the business. We do not have a complete worldview, but we tend to work with industries or parts of or job functions, categories that are data heavy. And there are 4 principal ones that we work with deeply. One is marketing services, but partly because of historical reasons, but also because there's a big investment there. Next is research analytics, market research. Some of the worst offenders, some of the quickest learners. They should really be the best at data storytelling. Often they're not. A third is pharma, and pharma is really, really interesting. And I would say I would put pharma up pretty high. Pharma clearly is very, for good reasons, very, very, very carefully regulated, because we're dealing with people's health and well-being and ultimately their lives. And I think pharma is about what pharma is doing today, B2B was doing 10 years ago, and B2C was doing 20 years ago. But within the guardrails that they have, I think the guardrails and the caution has allowed and enabled them to really to catch up. But there tends to be a kind of paralysis by over-analysis, a sort of British civil service, Unilever kind of phenomenon. We just need to do one more piece of research, just one more piece of research. And that's understandable because we're dealing with people's lives. So I would say that they're doing very well. Marketing services, some elements are doing brilliantly. But the one area that I think is really beginning to leave the commercial sector behind is academia. And you might think, hang on, I thought you said that academics are the worst at the curse of knowledge. That is true, but for the last getting on for 20 years, all higher education establishments in the United Kingdom, but also in many, many other places around the world now, are copying this template. Every 7 years, they have to explain what I would call data storytelling. They have to explain in a very restrictive template, in layperson's language, intelligent layperson's language. They have to explain what the real world impact of their work has been. Not how many papers have they published or conferences have they attended. How have they changed policy? How has their innovation led to, for example, supply chain improvements? What have they done that has changed? And that requirement, and there are case studies that all the universities have to write, and they spend years and years and years in preparation. I know a lot about it because my business partner runs an expert consultancy that focuses just in this area. Those that get it right, if you can move from a 2-star to a 4-star case study, and you do that repeatedly across your the different schools in which you work, it's not about the storytelling, it's about the actual impact you're having. It needs to be mediated through storytelling. If you can do that, you can increase the funding, and then if you increase the funding, you can get, you get obviously more research grants, you get more students, you build some longevity into your institution and your department. So I would say that those in the academic sector that really get and understand and put the time and effort behind impact right, they could teach industry a whole lot, because industry is understandably motivated, driven, judged by performance, particularly listed businesses, but that can skew the actual impact that business is having. Perversely, the lack of commercial incentive, although, for some academics, commercialization of their idea is absolutely the measure of success, but the lack of commercial incentives could teach the commercial sector a whole lot.
It's brilliant, and it's interesting to hear academic environment, and shows you the pressure that they're under to better explain what they're up to, which I think is fantastic. So we're almost there, Sam. So for those that are sitting and have listened in detail, they're probably thinking, I loved all of this, and I go through the same with the various books that I've read on this topic. You get to the point where you're like, all right, I need one thing. What's that thing? What's the habit that I can start tomorrow and keep it going for 3 months that's going to get me to become an ever increasingly better storyteller? So what's that one change that I could make to be able to start being a better storyteller?
I'm not going to give you anything I've given you already. There's a whole lot of other stuff that we've had. Watch more comedy. Would be and find the comedy that you like, and it might be storytelling comedy, it might be stand-up, it might be episodic. It doesn't really matter. There's a fantastic phenomenon in comedy. It's known, particularly in narrative comedy, as the Switcheroo. So you're taking people down a line, you're telling them a story, you're relating an anecdote, and you're lulling the audience into the false sense of security that they know where the story is going, and they sort of laugh a little bit, and then you flip it 180 degrees, and you go to a completely other place, and that confounding of expectations makes you stop, reappraise, and then dissolve into laughter. Now, you might say that's a bit of a weird thing to single out. There's some really compelling academic research that has been replicated that shows that when you put people in brain scanners and you look at brain activity when they are trying to solve insight problems, not analytical problems, insight problems, to join old and old together to make something genuinely new. When the moment or the period of dawning realization at the moment that happens, the electrical activity in the brain is identical to what happens when people are watching comedy that has a switcheroo. And so I think that we can learn a huge amount from the narrative structure of comedy that confounds our expectations. Because, as I said right at the very beginning, nobody says we haven't got enough data. Everybody says we haven't got enough insight. People are chucking dashboards and charts on the wall and saying, look at all the insights there. They aren't insights. So take some time out, because insightful thinking requires our subconscious mind to join old and old together to make something new. Take some time out, watch some comedy, learn from the comedy greats. Doesn't matter who they are. Have a nice time and a relax into the bargain, and see if you can think about how you might apply that to the confounding the expectations of the board that you're presenting to about the supply chain problem tomorrow.
It's fantastic advice, from avoiding data squirrels to watching more comedy. It really is interesting, and like you say, comedians are the world's best storytellers. They understand exactly what their audience is thinking, and they understand exactly how to lull their audience into a sense of security, and then challenge the whole raison d'etre for their thinking. So I love it. All right, so look, here's the thing. Sam's got his own podcast channel out there. It is absolutely fantastic. There is a link below here for you to go ahead and just go straight to Sam's podcast. I would highly recommend that you do subscribe to it and you do get the notifications on, so that you're not left waiting to find out more from the type of work that he's doing and the fantastic insights that he brings to be able to storytell in your data. If you've stuck with us through this series, you know how to spot data malarkey, and more importantly, how to eliminate it from your supply chain. A huge thank you to Sam for sharing insights that every supply chain leader should hear. If you got value from this conversation, give it a like, share it with your team, and don't forget to follow Sam on Data Malarkey Podcast and Show. The links are in the description. And if you want more conversation like this, where we, cut through the noise and focus on actually transforming your supply chain, then please make sure you like and subscribe to this channel. There's plenty of more to come. Thank you for your time.